It's All Hallows Eve from the cold, dark depths of a secret dungeon somewhere deep in the remote Pacific Northwest. It's good to have you with us. We're going to go on a virtual trick-or-treat tonight, that is for sure. And I'm glad you're along for the ride. Much like last night, it's the same old shindig, but a new version of it here tonight, literally. We've got more stories from you, the listeners, both those of you that you've called in and shared throughout the week. And, of course, the line remains open for you to join us. I'll give out the number here. It's 818-790-8255. That's 855-790-TALK. Outside North America is 503-506-0396. And on Skype, ITP51. All of those methods are all systems go, and we welcome your stories tonight. So we've got recorded stories. We've got stories that could come in at any point in time. Literally just ring and we'll fit you in. I love it when we can just interrupt the conversation and head in a different direction. It really is awesome. And, of course, plenty of speakers here tonight on the program, people who have investigated odd phenomena and lived through that themselves as well. And so that is pretty much the gist of the conversation tonight. It's very interesting because I came across a study, which might not seem like it's related to paranormal or Halloween, but it totally, definitely is here. 2019-2020 National Pet Owners Survey found that 67% of U.S. households, or about 85 million households, own a pet. So that's a lot of us who own pets, and we consider them parts of our family. We take care of them as if they are family. Sometimes we take better care of them than other people in our family. And when they leave and they depart, it is a very, very sad thing. There's no easy way of grieving a loss like that. However, some actually find comfort in the fact that they can communicate with the spirit of a pet who has moved on. And so not only are there a lot of households who have experienced loss of a pet, there's a smaller fraction of that have had communication with their pets in the afterlife. And I found it very, very interesting, a story online that referenced a premise in which I hadn't necessarily thought of, and I'm glad I found it in preparation for this show tonight. You wonder why your cats are so jittery and why they run around the house like chickens with their heads cut off? Like it seems like they're always chasing a fly or going after something, and you just don't get what it is they might be seeing in their little cat brains. Well, if you could get inside of the brain of a cat, I'm sure it would be a trip and a half. But, and I'm speaking because we have a cat, and I know exactly all of the maneuverisms and mannerisms and intricacies of that and weird oddities, the behaviors that the cats experience and exhibit. What if maybe they are seeing so literally something out of the corner of their eye and they don't know how to handle it, and maybe that's what they're reacting to, and these could be spirits in another dimension that we don't see, much like when you would go investigate a location, you may not experience that at the peripheral level, right? You have to kind of look at it with a different lens in order to experience that. Well, we all know that animals are certainly more sensitive to events, sensitive to weather events. They seem to know when you're just having one of those days, right? So they can obviously sense emotion of some kind. And so what I'm getting at here is there seems to be some communication that can exist not only between pets that are currently living, but pets that have passed, that may have lived in an apartment, right? There may have been animals that lived in an apartment, you move in, or a house and you move in. Any place that's not built brand new, right? There could be something that has lived there that may have died there, or whose energy may have returned there. And so with all of those things at play, I'm wondering if maybe some of this, what seems like neurotic behavior from some of our animals, is actually them just seeing something in a different sense than we can. Interesting thought, huh? I think so. Now, coping with the loss of a pet obviously is extremely tragic. Nobody wants to go through that. It's like losing a child to many. Rob Gutro, though, he knows the grief. He's an author. He's a paranormal investigator. He's a medium. He's with Inspired Ghost Tracking of Maryland, and he's become known as a pet medium, although he communicates with pets and people who have passed. And since he was a child, he could receive messages from ghosts or spirits who have crossed over. His latest book, Pets in the Afterlife 3, Messages from Spirit Dogs, tells through illustrative stories of how pets and spirit give signs to either their pet parents directly or through interpretive readings. He has also written many other books, including Ghosts and Spirits Explained, Similarities and Differences. It's good to have Rob Gutro on this Halloween night on Dead Air into the Parabnormal. How are you?
Thanks, Jeremy. Doing great. How are you tonight?
Fantastic. Good to have you here. So obviously you've dealt with the loss of a pet. As I understand, you actually dealt with the loss of two of your pets in the midst of writing your most recent book. Is that true?
Yeah, that's correct.
Wow, I'm sorry for your loss.
We lost a Weimaraner and a dachshund. One was 16. The other one was almost 16. And they passed 5 months apart from each other. So it was a tough year in 2020.
Yeah, it was a tough year for everybody. It was that the first loss of an animal you had experienced, Rob? Because you've written other books about this.
Yeah, that was those were actually number 3 and 4. So the first pet that I had was Buzz, who passed in 2005 as a puppy when he was killed by a car, and he actually opened the doors for me to communicate with other pets. Then we lost another dog, Sprite, who was a dachshund in 2013. And all of these dogs have come through to me in many ways since 2005. And Buzz actually taught me a lot of the different ways that pets communicate from the other side. So I've written the books to teach people what signs to look for.
And I'm interested in getting into those. So talk about some of those signs. We obviously know how our pets behave here in the present. What are the signs to look for once they've passed that they may be coming back to, give us some love or say hello or whatever the case may be?
Sure. Well, there's a lot of ways, actually, Jeremy, and pets communicate much in the same way that people communicate, but from the pet's perspective. So pets can communicate by giving us noises. We may hear nails on the floor. We may hear a bark or a meow that always sounds like it's coming from another room. That's because it takes a lot of energy. We may feel a pressure, the pressure against our legs at night when we're sleeping of a cat or a dog if they slept in the bed. Pets also can lead us to another animal that resembles them. That's happened to me many times, actually. And it's usually around an anniversary or a birthday or some special occasion. So those are just some of the things.
Would a bark sound the same? I guess all barks are different, right? So if you hear your dog's bark or you hear your cat's meow in the afterlife, would you notice it?
Sure, that's a great question. So because we have 4 dogs in spirit, each one of them has an identifiable bark, just like people have identifiable voices. So when our dog Franklin passed in 2020, the day after he passed, I was outside with our other 3 dogs, and my partner was inside watching television in another room, and he heard Franklin's bark from the kitchen. And we know that it was Franklin's bark because the other dogs are outside with me, and he could distinguish Franklin's bark.
Interesting, because I've always wondered that, and so here you clearly have an experience where, like you said earlier, that the voices may feel like they're coming from a different room because it takes a lot of energy to make that sound.
Yes. Yeah, that's absolutely true. So because I'm a meteorologist in my career, my day job, I explained that the foundation of the paranormal is basically in energy. So when we die, the energy within us couples with our memories and our personality and the knowledge of the life we lived, and we choose to stay either earthbound, what I call a ghost, or we cross over as what I call a spirit. So most pets, about 98% of them, cross over and become spirits instead of earthbound ghosts. Because it requires so much energy, and they use physical energies like heat, light, water, and electricity, and they also use emotional energies. Spirits use love, faith, and hope. Earthbound ghosts use fear, anxiety, and depression, and anger, and so forth. They all use energy to get strong enough to communicate. So because there was so much love for our dog Franklin in the past, the dachshund, he was able to bark. Give us one bark from the afterlife to let us know he was okay.
Wow. You mentioned that more of them become spirits than ghosts, so I guess it might make sense to get into the differences. Many would put those into the same category.
Sure. So that's actually the foundation of my books, is that I've been doing this for about 12 years now. I realized I had the abilities when I was a teenager, but I've really been doing this for about 12 years. And I realized that the words ghost and spirit are interchangeable. But I don't agree with that, because the earthbounds are restricted to where they choose to inhabit after they die. Spirits, the ones that cross over, like your grandparents, for instance, they have chosen to cross over and join the energies of the cosmos or heaven or Valhalla, whatever you want to call it. That's different, because they, as a spirit, can go anywhere, anytime on Earth, any place. Ghosts don't have that ability to move from where they are. So that's why
ghosts don't have the ability to travel.
That's right. Yep.
Interesting.
There certainly are limited exceptions. They can attach themselves to a person, which is, in my experience, rare, or an object. And I've encountered that twice. So that's not very common, but that can happen, in my experience.
Do all dogs go to heaven? I had to ask that, Rob.
That's a great pun on that movie.
Yeah, it's a cheesy movie, but I mean, there might be a message here.
There is a good message there, and yeah, pretty much. I would say yes. I would say about 98% of all pets cross over. Very rarely do they stay, and the only reason they would stay is if they were extremely. More than extremely reliant or bound to somebody, likely somebody who may be sickly, and they want to be there for them when they pass. And usually, if the person passes and the dog had stayed behind, the dog or cat will also cross over with them at the same time. But it is rare. I met one ghost dog and one ghost cat in the entire time I've been doing this.
What do you find more common, the spirits of cats or dogs, or is there a difference?
Yeah, there really is no difference. They come to people who had cats or dogs, and so I get emails from people all around the world who've lost a pet, and I communicate with pets from everywhere. And they're always coming through in many ways. So a lot of people have actually shared their experiences with me about ways that their own pets have communicated. Like cats, for instance, like to jump on the end of a bed and kind of walk across the end of a bed. Dogs like to curl up against their pet parents' legs when they're sleeping. Cats do the same thing. So I've communicated too with any domesticated pet. That includes, yesterday I communicated with a guinea pig. They can't tell you a whole lot, but you feel their emotion. And I can share that. And I also, they also share pain of death, like what caused them to pass. And I get a lot of emails from people saying, what caused my pet to pass? So I was able to answer the question about that, about the gerbil and the guinea pig. So yeah, any domesticated pet, any animal that hangs around people all the time are animals that can communicate with a medium.
Do animals are they susceptible to possession from demons like humans are?
No. So, in all the time I've been doing this, I've never encountered a demon.
Never heard about one.
I've heard people reference. No.
Okay.
Nope. And I've communicated already with thousands of animals around the world. So, no, that's the good news. So what I find is that when we pass away,
a demon with claws and sharp teeth is a very, very frightening thought here on this All Hallows Eve.
Yeah, that's for sure. So I have a kind of a different opinion on demons because of my scientific background, and
sure.
And that is that what we call demons were never human, but because as a scientist, because I know we have like 4,800 exoplanets out there, and there are another 7,800 that we haven't cataloged yet, there's obviously life somewhere else. And as there is life somewhere else, when they die, they become energy, and they can traverse the cosmos, and they can come here as a spirit. They maintain their personalities and so forth. And because they don't know what we are, they may act defensive or what we think is hostile from the other side. So that's the way I look at demons. They're likely extraterrestrial life that comes here from another place.
Interesting thought. We don't have enough time to explore that. One thing that's important here, I think, Rob, is that if you are anticipating some sort of communication with your pet who has departed, that you shouldn't necessarily consider that everything is actually a sign, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. That is a really great point. Jeremy, that was one of the things that somebody asked me from the beginning. And they were kind of mocking me, but everything is not a sign. There has to be some connection with a birthday, an anniversary, or a holiday, or at whenever you are thinking of the person or pet. And one of the things I mentioned is that pets, like people, have the ability to influence things in nature, like birds and butterflies and dragonflies and so forth. But that doesn't mean every time you see a butterfly, it's a sign from somebody. What it means is, if you can correlate that with a birthday, anniversary, holiday, or the time you're thinking of them, it may be. Plus, whatever it is, bird, butterfly, whatever, has to act oddly around you in a way that it normally doesn't.
So,
does that answer your question?
You're saying the spirit of your pet would be acting differently, or the things around it?
The things they're influencing. Like a butterfly. So when our dog Sprite passed away in 2013, July 8th, the day after he passed, we were in the backyard with our other dogs, and a yellow and black butterfly flew in the backyard. Now, we hadn't seen a butterfly the whole summer. And I thought that was kind of odd, but actually it was actually the same day. It was the day we put him to sleep. So normally our dogs would chase butterflies or insects or whatever. We have dachshunds and we had a Weimaraner, and they would always chase everything. They didn't. What was odd about this is that the butterfly came and flew in a pattern all around the ground, on the ground, around all of the dogs, just as the way Sprite would have walked, and they didn't bother the butterfly. seeing that the butterfly took the same kind of path that Sprite would walk outside, and the fact that the dogs didn't go after it, that made me realize that this was a sign from Sprite. A couple of years later, on July 8th, I was driving to work, and a yellow and black butterfly flew right across my window, and I heard Sprite say, "Dad, I'm here. I just want to let you know that I'm here." And then I realized what day it was. It was the anniversary of his passing. So there's no such thing as a coincidence when it comes to spirit.
So, Rob, is it because you have ability as a psychic or a medium that you're able to communicate with these spirits? Is that how it happens?
Actually, no. Everybody can communicate with them, and everybody can find the signs. All they have to do is be more attentive to the ways that they communicate. And Jeremy, that's why I wrote Pets in the Afterlife 1, 2, and 3. They're filled with stories and examples of not only readings that I've done, but stories that people have shared with me about what signs their pets have given them. So I've written them to teach people how to look for the right signs.
I appreciate you coming on the program, Rob. It was wonderful to talk with you once again.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me, and happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween to you as well. That's Rob Gutro, his website, robgutro.com, and you can find links to the books and all of his social media there. Our Dead Air Night 2 on this All Hallows Eve of Into the Paranormal will continue momentarily.
Dead Air. Parabnormal News. I'm Brad Bernards. Signs of a planet transiting a star outside of the Milky Way galaxy may have been detected for the first time. This intriguing result using NASA's Chandra X-ray Observatory opens up a new window to search for exoplanets at greater distances than ever before, according to NASA.gov.
They used a technique looking for the temporary dimming of X-rays from an object with NASA's Chandra X-ray Observatory. This intriguing result could open up a new window for exploring exoplanets. That is, planets outside our solar system.
The possible exoplanet candidate is located in the spiral galaxy Messier 51, also called the Whirlpool Galaxy because of its distinctive profile. Exoplanets are defined as planets outside of our solar system. A group of researchers wants to save Earth from a potential asteroid apocalypse using a new planetary defense method called PI, short for pulverize it, according to reporting in livescience.com. The plan, detailed in a lengthy technical paper on the University of California, Santa Barbara Experimental Cosmology Group website, and submitted to the journal Advances in Space Research, aims to smash large, potentially life-threatening asteroids into hundreds of tiny pieces by launching an array of penetrator rods into the asteroid's path. These rods, each measuring about 6 to 10 feet long, could contain explosives, potentially even nuclear ones, to blast an approaching asteroid into relatively harmless bits long before it reaches Earth's atmosphere, the researchers wrote. Somewhere between abnormal and paranormal. I'm Brad Bernards, Parabnormal News.
You can call Into the Paranormal toll-free in North America at 855-790-8255. That's 855-790-TALK. Dead Air.
Yeah, told you it was going to be one of those nights, friends. 855-790-8255, toll-free in North America. That's 855-790-TALK. Outside North America, it's 503-506-0396. And on Skype at ITP51. I do appreciate the stories that we've had sent in, and we will have more of those coming up. I want to read one here real quick from Francine in Oregon, who sent this in via our Instagram page. It says, in the early 70s, a pair of pants used to walk around an isolated remote town near me, known as the Fairview Walking Pair of Pants. It was near Myrtle Point, which is in Oregon, down in the southern part of the state. She goes on to say, I found old Levi's all crushed and rotting in a mud hole behind the haunted house. I don't know if that's where she lived or where she had visited, but says that she took that as time to leave and left the property. If you find crushed and rotting Levi jeans stewing in a pit in a mud hole behind a place that you know is haunted, it makes you wonder whether or not the things in which make the place haunted are responsible for the crumpled up jeans, or if there's something more sinister, and if that has an influence, say a serial killer or something of the kind, and if that has an influence on the property. I really appreciate you sharing that story with us, Francine. But as we continue here on this All Hallows Eve, we're going to peel back the veil of the paranormal and what lurks on the other side. It may truly terrify you. We're joined now by M.R. Gorga, who's a former copywriter and journalist with film and TV credentials, who now brings his talents to the paranormal and horror genre. His writing career now spanning decades. He's most recently the author of Demons Among Us, shocking real-life stories from the paranormal, and he's here with us now. Dead air on Into the Paranormal. M.R. Gorga, welcome to the program.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So why the horror and paranormal genre?
I think it's just something that really I took to at an early age. I grew up in the 70s when Amityville Horror just came out and Son of Sam was on a rampage, and I just remember this fear that spread over over the town and over the kind of the tri-state area. And for some reason, those things really seemed to have an effect on me, especially the Amityville Horror with the pig demon with the red eyes and Jody. And not sure why my parents took me to see that movie, but but it seemed to have some kind of like effect on my interest in this space and what I enjoy writing.
Well, I guess they were just trying to influence your future career at a very young age.
Maybe they had great foresight, for all I know. Something
of the kind. So,
right.
Have you lived through some of these experiences yourself?
Yes, the experiences in the book, there's personal experiences and there's historical experiences. So the personal experiences are all mine. There are things I actually went through, and seen, and actually have been a part of these demonic assaults. And then there's for the historical section of the book, there's a story of the first fully documented eyewitness account of demonic possession in American history, and that was recorded or reported 20 years before the Salem witch trials.
Demonic assaults. Can you go into some detail there for us?
Yeah, I mean, the book itself, Demons Among Us, was an answer to a string of assaults I had for about a week or two, and which included nighttime, very late at night strangulations with invisible hands trying to choke me, evil whisperings, chest suppressions, scratchings, and the like. And they really just try to just create harm and chaos. And so the book Demons Among Us was an answer to these strings of attacks, just to expose those things that kind of lurk behind the veil of the paranormal.
So we're talking about things that you could see out of the corner of your eye or like straight on?
Well, it varies. It varies. There's things that you could see at times when they want to show themselves. I talk about one of those incidences in the book. It was the most terrifying experience I ever had. And then there's things that are just invisible. Sometimes they remain invisible while they, try to choke the life half out of you. So it could be either or. Something
that has seemingly superhuman strength, but there's not even an outline. It's just, air, seemingly. And here it is, and you're fearing for your life.
Yeah, you really feel like this a clutching around your neck, and it feels like the hands are like a vice, and there's no way to pry them off. At first you wake up with a start because it just takes you by surprise. And that's part of the fear that they afflict. And, so part of it is surprise and part of it is just complete terror. And usually when these things show up, whether they're invisible or not, there's a power or a dark presence that can be felt that fills the room. And you could sense this presence in the room. It's a pure evil.
So what were the nighttime visitations that you experienced?
Yeah. Again, it was like nighttime strangulations. They usually come at like 3 a.m. It seems to be their witching hour, I suppose. It's those invisible chokings. It's the chest suppressions, what people would term sleep paralysis. But the experience comes with such a powerful dread, again, that presence that comes with it. So it's not just, I can't move my limbs. It's literally, you feel something just press upon you. And, again, it comes with that, that dark terror along with it. And what they do is they take your breath away as well. So you can't cry out for help or anything of this sort. And, for some time, eventually you'll finally eke something out, but for some time they take that ability to call out away.
Which is one of your defense mechanisms. You can't cry out or call out to someone near you. And if you're paralyzed, you certainly can't grab something. Not that if you grab something and tried to swing it at invisible air, how that might end up, but those are things that you can't do.
Well, these are invisible beings, so you really and they're like supernatural strength involved here. So, they're invisible, they're supernatural, they're super intelligence. And so you kind of don't have a real fighting chance with anything you can do naturally. You're not going to punch them, you're not going to shoot them, So they have quite an advantage over our natural body being supernatural and all.
What about the influence that these dark forces have on the world and how they use that to deceive and destroy and even worse? Are we all kind of at risk to this, or do they only go after certain souls?
Well, I believe that everybody is at risk, but some people are susceptible from what they allow or they invite into their lives. If people are dabbling in the occult arena, practicing Ouija boards, tarot, horoscopes, black magic, white magic, anything. So any of the occultic things really invite malevolent influence over time, and so those people will be susceptible. But then there's a more sinister thing that's more covert and more behind the scenes. And when we talk about evil and dark forces, we have to understand what we're talking about here. These are evil fallen angels. They're evil angels, so they're evil spirits. And so their mission is to steal, kill, and destroy, and that's however means necessary. Now, what is more sneaky is how they function, and they function according to their role or their job, so to say. So you have spirits that do various things, meaning there will be a spirit of suicide. There'll be a spirit of depression. There'll be a spirit of anxiety. There'll be a spirit of greed. There'll be a spirit of lust. There'll be a spirit of pharmakoi or pharmaceutical, which is also sorceries in the Greek. And so you have this whole realm functioning to destroy on various levels. And if you can look at the spiritual realm in terms of influencer marketing. Now, if I was a smart demon or a smart devil, I would go after the most influential people in various spaces and professions. And so, if you can look at it as influencer marketing, I would go after the most influential figurehead in society, whether that be a president, whether that be a political leader, and I would try to infiltrate his mind and thoughts and inject my ideas and agendas, because that would have the most influence over a people group or society. And then I would do the same exact thing with celebrities, sports, entertainment, and music, and every other form of society. I would pick out the most influential people in all of these arenas in order to impact the most and create the most influence in these areas with whatever my evil plan is. And so that's kind of how these things operate. They operate through people. Demons and demon spirits need people. They don't walk around as like hairy monsters or show themselves as like hairy monsters, but they are skilled at manipulation, deceit, and very cunning, and know how to get you to put the thoughts into you and put the ideas into you, and that's how they penetrate society, is through people, willingly or unwillingly.
So you mentioned earlier that demons are fallen angels. How do we know that? A lot of people think demons are aliens, demons are this, demons are that.
Right.
How do you get to that conclusion?
Right. Well, I write from a very biblical, a very biblical point of view. So my point of view is going to be, slighted towards that. So, and what the Bible says is that Lucifer, or Satan, drew a third of the angels to his cause in heaven, meaning that he created a rebellion in heaven, and his thing was that he wanted to sit on the throne as God. He said, I will ascend to the hill and I will be like God, and I will sit on the hills of the north. And you can find that stuff in the book of Isaiah. So he had created this rebellion that caused a third of the angels to follow him. And then there was war in heaven. And ultimately these evil, rebellious spirits were cast out of heaven. And then they were cast into the cosmos. They were cast into the earth. And they consider this their home.
And what, we don't belong here, or what?
No, we do belong here because that's where God put us. But we do belong here. It's them because they got cast out. That's part of their deception. Like, well, we believe it is my authority. If it's like Satan, you can see forms of the deception in. There's biblically speaking, and he's tempting Jesus. He's like, I'll give you all the kingdoms of the world here. And he shows them the kingdoms of the world. And these are mine to give, he says, but they weren't his to give. as if you just fall down and worship me. And he's trying to tempt Jesus to worship him, right? And so he believes that he has the right to kind of, he believes that he has ownership over the world, which he doesn't. So, and that's how he'll deceive. He's like, well, this is mine to give you, and, and things of that nature, but he has no right. Nothing is his.
The demons among us, how do they function? Do they need food the way you and I do? What is do they function in society much like we do?
Well, again, it's like if you take it, they need people to kind of like promulgate their cause or to spread their cause, whatever the agenda might be. So they do. I don't know if they eat. I've never eaten angel's food before. Maybe angel's food cake or something like that, or devil's food cake. But I've never, I've never sat down with a demon to eat with one before. So, yeah, right. A couple of girlfriends that are questionable, but yeah, no, they function as a government or an army or a corporation would. You have the head figurehead, and then you have various offices and roles and functions of other spirit entities, and these are all caused. These are all used to kind of take down humanity or an individual, whether it's a slow game, a fast game, or a long game. Some strategies, and very strategic, by the way, very, very strategic. They can have long strategy, they can have short strategy, but because they have a lot of time on, they could influence individuals in the long term, or societies in the long term, or governments in the long term. And so they are very strategic in their attack. And if it takes a long time, they're fine with that. If they want to give a sudden attack, then they'll do that. So they do function, much like, a hierarchy of government or corporation or anything that has, that has order in say a corporation.
MR, if someone is committed to their faith, should that be enough really to prevent them from, infestation?
That's a really good question. I mean, it doesn't necessarily make you absent from ever experiencing these things. In fact, it actually having faith in Jesus Christ actually creates a bigger target for you, because once you become a believer, what happens is you have switched sides, whether you're on a side or not. You switch sides, and now you became a follower of God through Jesus Christ, and now you have a mortal enemy who's invisible, spiritual, highly cunning. And so these dark forces now become your enemies, and you now have a target on your back, which becomes bigger because they don't want you to become an influence, and they don't want you to, spread the gospel. They don't want other people coming to understand or the knowledge of God. And so they actually work against you harder than someone who's not a believer, because the more you grow in your faith, or the stronger you become in your faith, the bigger your target. So you're going to come under assault at some point.
Our Halloween broadcast of Dead Air will continue. My guest is MR Gorga. Your questions, your calls, your stories, we want to hear them tonight. This is the night. 855-790-8255. Toll free in North America. Outside North America, it's 503-506-0396. And on Skype, ITP51. It's Halloween night on Into the Paranormal. Dead Air continues.
Think you've heard it all? Just wait until Into the Paranormal continues. Dead Air. Dead Air. Dead Air. Dead Air. Dead Air.
greatest unknown. UFOs, aliens, ghosts, Bigfoot, conspiracies and cover-ups. And to the Parabnormal we go.
The freaks come out at night on Into the Parabnormal, where vampires are highly encouraged. Dead air.
I'm Jeremy Scott on this All Hallows Eve. Into the Parabnormal. It's good to have you with us, as always. And I appreciate those of you who called in during the week to share your stories with us for whatever reason. A lot of folks, couldn't be with us, but they are listening in spirit or after the fact, and they wanted to be a part of the program, doing trick-or-treating, Halloween parties, that sort of thing. Maybe they got to work. And so we've heard from some of you who have shared your stories with us in advance, and one of those is our good friend Kimmy up in Ottawa.
This is Kimmy. I'm a regular listener to the show, and I want to talk about a really scary local story. It's about the Allen Memorial Institute in Montreal, and this is where the CIA and Canadian government were conducting experiments, brainwashing experiments for military purposes, for interrogations. And Subproject 68, MKUltra Subproject 68 was carried out there. The building is said to be very, very haunted, and I'm just going to read to you a quick clipping of what the McGill Tribune reported. And they basically said the upper buildings of the McGill campus appear to be the most ghost-ridden of them all. The Allen Memorial Institute, the MKUltra experiments, partially funded by the CIA, where patients were subjected to electroshock therapy, lobotomies, and sensory deprivation, is extremely haunted. There are rumors that a secret children's cemetery exists behind the property, just behind the stone wall. It is at the bottom of a slope that leads up to the Olmsted Road on Mount Royal. It's a rocky forested area, and it's popular with psychics and paranormal investigators. So there have been numerous rumors that there have been children that were screaming at the location. They've seen the lights on top of the observatory go on for no reason. And actually, there's a tour group in Montreal where the Allen Memorial Institute is located that gives tours. And they have actually seen many haunting locations. They've heard ghosts, screams. They've actually seen the observatory go on, the light go on at night. So it's just a really creepy area. I know right now they're trying to excavate the area due to the children's bodies being buried there. So it's definitely not somewhere you want to go at night. In case anyone wants to know more about it, Jeremy's done 2 shows about it, episodes 322 and 333. So you can go back in the archives and listen. Also, if you want to know more about the story about the excavation, which the Mohawk Mothers are trying to set up, you can go to our Facebook page, which is Brainwashing Victims of the Allen Memorial Institute, public news page. Thank you.
No, thank you, Kim. We appreciate that story. I can only imagine that the torture that went on within that facility and that it could be haunted, that there could still be these events happening there, I think is not too out of the norm. I would expect that other places, where they administered, tuberculosis to patients back in the day, mental health facilities, those kinds of places. We've heard those stories over the years, and I really appreciate that story, Kimmy, from Ottawa, about the Allen Memorial Institute. My guest is M.R. Gorga, who's written the book Demons Among Us, Shocking Real-Life Stories from the Paranormal, here on this Dead Air Halloween night. You were telling us about religion and how that really does ground people from, I guess, demonic infestation, right?
Yeah, I mean, because if again, it's not, a shield that you're never going to come under attack. But if you do have your faith and belief in Christ and God, you have authority over these principalities and these demonic forces, because Jesus himself said, I give you power. I'll give you authority to trample on snakes and scorpions and all the power of the enemy, because we have an enemy. And so when we become believers, or we become followers of Christ, believers get this power. Believers get this promise, and because there's a real live demonic forces out there that you're going to face, and you have this authority that's been given to you by God to trample on all the power of the enemy, just like he said.
What about lifestyles or characteristics for those who are not religious, which would make them more susceptible to this?
Well, everyone is susceptible. I mean, there's people out there who have come under attack or assault or in that nature, and some have no faith or belief at all. So, many people are, if you're human, you're susceptible to be influenced by demonic forces and evil powers. Okay.
What about the very first report, eyewitness account in this case of demonic possession? How far does this one go back, and what do we know about it?
This one goes back to 1671. I've did over 350 years of historical research, very, very deep into records of, vital records and marriage records and, land and all of these things to kind of come up with the story. But the story is between the town minister in early Massachusetts, a town minister, and his 16-year-old maidservant. As the story goes, she started showing some signs that he found questionable going on with his live-in servant, and so it just got to the point 2 weeks into this, he started writing in his journal blow by blow, which happened to be Monday, October 30th, 1671. So basically 350 or so years to the day this was happening. And so he found it strange enough that he decided to take to his journal, and he created a blow by blow for about 3 months or 90 days of these things that had befallen his young maid. And some of these things are just an absolute atrocity. She really came under a lot of assault, and it's a historical deep dive, and it's a little known story. And so I thought that this book, that Demons Among Us, would be the perfect vehicle to really bring this story to life, because there's others who have mentioned it, and I found in writings, but they kind of gloss over some of these very, very dark and disturbing things that happened to this girl. And, it's like, well, this happened to her and this happened and ... And I said, well, what's going on between these dots here? So I just sort of peeling back the onion, and the more I peel back, the deeper and darker this story got. And so he actually ended up penning the first fully documented eyewitness account of possession in American history. And he was writing a report to give it to the most prominent minister at the time in Boston, was Increase Mather. And he was writing this as a report to send to him. And it turns out that Increase Mather buried this report for 12 years.
And then what happened?
Well, I mean, there was the remarkable thing about this was the minister tried to rule out medical conditions and things of that nature. So this became a thing really known within the the spiritual or religious or Christian community among the leaders of various local towns, and it became it's what made this minister so influential in the Salem witch trials was because of his observation and his close proximity to this case. He was very moderate in his approach, and he argued against the witch trials, meaning that spectral evidence or the evidence of a ghostly apparition of somebody else performing harm, causing harm to other people, this was not sufficient evidence enough to convict on a witchcraft charge. So he really kind of, he was a central figure in trying to stop the witchcraft trials because he had a very moderate approach and very sound approach to this, as opposed to just knee-jerk reaction and saying, well, she's a witch, hang her. So he was really instrumental in trying to stop the trials.
So what other kinds of dark attacks are featured in your book?
Well, one of the assaults. Well, you want me to get into this
Sure,
story?
Sure.
One of the stories you can find in the book is the most terrifying thing I've ever experienced, and it happened. I was working at a local newspaper, lost my job, which meant I had to eventually give up my downtown apartment. So I moved out west into a townhome that one of my family members pretty much just abandoned. So when I got there, it was been abandoned for like 6 months, 8 months, however long it was. So when I got there, the place was completely dilapidated. The grass was overgrown and brown. The fence was hanging from its hinges without, it was like
Perfect
raw
timing,
wood.
right?
Yeah. I mean, it was when I arrived, I mean, the thing was creaking on its hinges like you'd see like in a horror movie. I mean, it literally was like I showed up at the home of the monsters, and and it had these two big block square windows on either side, and they looked over the land, over the over the landscape, like these two vacant eyes. It was really, really creepy, like it was a Amityville horror home, And so that's where I set up shop. And I go inside, and inside is absolute heartbreak because everything is still left inside. Kids' toys, everything is in there just like they've gone out for milk and they were coming back. Letters on the table, milk in the fridge, dishes in the sink. I mean, it just looked like they still live there. And it was, basically a heartbreaking scene. So I set up shop on the upstairs bedroom. It's 2 stories. And one night I'm trying to go to sleep, and I smell this very rotten smell. Smells like death, like a death with like a chemical note to it. And so I start smelling around upstairs, and I'm like, where is this smell coming from? It's putrid. And so when I go downstairs, check the garbage, there's nothing in the garbage, the disposal, nothing in the disposal. And so I look up at the air vent, and so I was like, maybe it might be coming from the air vent. So I take a chair, I hike up on the chair, and then it's coming from the air vent, and this rot is just blowing, pulsing onto my face. And it's the stench of like sulfur and death. And I had the suspicion that something was going on. So I get off the chair and I go I cut the power to the utility box to the air conditioning, get back up on the chair, and it's still coming out and blowing on me without any kind of mechanical assistance and no power. Now it's just blowing out on its own. So I have a suspicion something's happening in there at this point. And so I go up. So I go back upstairs and I try to go back to sleep, because whatever's going to happen is going to happen. And so while my eyes are closed, I see a flash underneath my eyelids, like a shift in the light. And so I don't want to open my eyes. So I turn over, and shortly after I turn over, I hear this voice call out, and it says, Michael. Really slow, really creepy. And it was very long and serpentine. And it sounded as far as away as it did near.
Are you starting to get a sense why your family had left those months earlier?
No, it didn't dawn on me at the time. Okay. And so it sounded like it was spoken from the back of this cave. It was near, but very far. And that's when I rolled over and I opened my eyes. And when I opened my eyes, there was this figure in black at my bedside. And it was tall, it was lanky, and had crooked shoulders, and its head was cocked with to one side, looking down at me like with an evil grin. And you could see the semblance of a face underneath its cowl, deep in under its hood. It had a hood, and when I looked down, I see this claw-like hand moving up my chest. And that was the first time. The reason why it was so terrifying is because I've had many experiences, but this is the very first time where the spiritual became physical, and I could physically feel it as real as I would touch anybody else, and this thing was clawing up my chest, and its aim was to choke and to kill me. And a couple things about this thing. It was very, very, very strange because as much as it was physical, it was spiritual as well. And as much as it was in bodily form, it was in spirit form, meaning that when I looked at the bottom of its robe, I could see through parts of it. And but the robe itself was at the bottom was rectangular strips. They weren't like shreds and tatters or anything. Very neat rectangular strips, ash gray to black. So the black, the deeper it went, is almost as if like you could see this going on forever. Like it just got deeper and blacker. And it was the bottom of its robe was moving like a watery motion, like it was underwater, just kind of like floaty. And it was like a real strange thought to have, but there was a beauty to its movement, which is a real weird thought to have at such a moment. But it was this figure in black that was the most terrifying thing, because it came with such a dark power. I've talked about it before, but this was to see magnified. And it came with such a deep and venomous hatred for me, not just for me, but for humanity, that you can not only just feel it on you, but you could feel it burning through you. It was like hot boiling tar inside my body, and I was paralyzed, and I couldn't call out because it comes with this dark power, and this thing is crawling up my chest, and I could physically feel it. And that was the most terrifying moment I've had with the demonic, just being able to see it so clearly and feel its physical presence as real as anybody's touch.
So why do you feel that you became a target of these attacks?
Well, I mean, because it's my stance for Christ. I talked about it. The more influential you become, the more of a target you become. I have operated and functioned for many years as an intercessory prayer leader for a church and a ministry, and so because of my role, I believe that I was targeted. And again, the more influential you become, or the more stronger you become in your faith and in your belief, the more susceptible you are to the attack. And I think that's what this attack was about.
I appreciate you coming on the program tonight. M.R. Gorga, author of Demons Among Us, shocking real-life stories from the paranormal. You have a happy Halloween.
Thank you. You too. Thanks.
I appreciate that. And, it's dead air, and so if you want to call and give us more of your stories, you can do that. 855-790-8255, toll free in North America. That's 855-790-8255. 503-506-0396 is the number outside North America. And on Skype, you can get through at ITP51. You can also just go to paranormalradio.com, and you'll get all of the information right there. And we are not done, friends. We will continue the Dead Air broadcast in just a couple of moments after another news from Brad Bernard's and an encore presentation of Halloween ghost story from our own paranormal news correspondent, Daniel Breuer. That is all still to come. Stick with us. Dead Air continuing on this All Hallows Eve on Into the Paranormal.
Dead Air.
Parabnormal News. I'm Brad Bernards. In December last year, the media reported an intriguing signal the Breakthrough Listen Project found in their radio telescope data, according to theconversation.com. The signal didn't appear to be the result of any recognizable astrophysical activity or any familiar Earth-based interference. Shane Smith, an intern at the Berkeley SETI Research Center, tells us what's unique about this signal.
This one had stuck out to me because it fit all of our criteria when we're looking for a signal. It was only present in our on observations as we look towards the source, and then it was not present in any of the off observations.
When you're searching for signs of extraterrestrial life, you want to be very careful about getting it right before you make any announcements. Sophia Sheik, postdoctoral researcher at UC Berkeley, says one thing is for sure.
For now, all we can say for sure is it's two different Earthbound transmitters mixing with each other. So, definitely not aliens.
Their results are reported in 2 papers in Nature Astronomy. A Dunlap Institute astronomer has discovered that our solar system may be surrounded by what she describes as a magnetic tunnel that can be seen in radio waves, the University of Toronto reports. Dr. Jennifer West, research associate at the Dunlap Institute for Astronomy and Astrophysics, is making a scientific case that 2 bright structures that are seen on opposite sides of the sky, previously considered to be separate, are actually connected and are made of rope-like filaments. This connection forms what looks like a tunnel around our solar system. West and her colleagues believe they are the first astronomers to connect them as a unit. Somewhere between abnormal and paranormal. I'm Brad Bernards, Parabnormal News.
It was a dark, dense, foggy night when tragedy struck at London's Heathrow Airport in March of 1948. It was a busy night at the fairly new facility, built only 2 years prior in 1946. Not surprisingly, flights were coming in and out. An incoming Douglas D-3 was on approach for landing when suddenly the aircraft lost control and began to nosedive towards the ground. The flight was carrying 22 souls when it caught on fire less than 6 seconds before hitting the ground, exploding and bursting into a huge fireball. Among the people in the airplane, only 3 were rescued. Unfortunately, 19 passengers were killed. The plane, operated by Savina Company, earlier that day when flying from Brussels to London, started having problems mid-air, and the captain had to communicate with the airport that they may have to perform an emergency landing. All emergency and medical personnel did come to the scene. The fog was so thick, however, one almost couldn't see their own hand in front of their face, and that's when the D-3 crashed. 3 passengers were immediately taken to the nearest medical center, which at the time was Hillingdon County Hospital. According to getreading.co.uk, 2 were badly injured, and 1 had died en route. It was the first major accident at the new airport. The investigation discovered the interior of the plane was in shambles, and there was only part of the left wing and the tail section left. During the rescue, firefighters were doing their best to put the flames out. Through the fog, screams of the passengers were still being heard as the flames engulfed the aircraft. Shortly after the horrifying crash, a man had arrived at the scene looking for his briefcase. The firefighters later reported seeing the same man in the wreckage, and according to reports, he wasn't alive. Since that night, the man has been seen lurking around the runways, and in 1970, the radar office picked up a signal which looked like a silhouette of a person walking down one of the runways. After checking it out, the man had disappeared. The ghost of Heathrow was wearing a dark suit and a bowler hat, like a businessman. But that's not the only entity staying around. The famous highwayman, Dick Durbin, has also been spotted at the main terminal. Staff have reported a man behind them, which could be a trickster, barking and howling, but when they turn around, nothing is there. 73 years later, this active paranormal hotspot still remains. This is Daniel Breuer, into the Parabnormal Dead Air.
Watch your step. Hide under your blankets. Whatever you do, prepare yourself for what's coming through your speakers. Into the Parabnormal.
Certainly has been some dark stuff tonight here on Dead Air into the Paranormal. I am Jeremy Scott, this All Hallows Eve edition. What is it about the claws and the scratches? We've heard it several stories, in fact. Brian in Arkansas, and then we heard additional stories, including from M.R. Gorga and whatnot, of beings that are apparently scratching people, clawing at people, and it really does even get more extreme from that. And I want to welcome on my next guest, who's a case in point, Michael Anthony Gagliardi, who is from Palm Desert, California, and after 40 years sat down to write about the experiences that happened to him when he was a child for 12 years under the roof of a home in which his mother was possessed. He obviously survived. This happened in the early 70s until the mid-80s. And it really is just an absolutely incredible story. He's obviously suffered traumatically because of this story, and I appreciate him so much coming on the program. Michael, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me, Jeremy. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm in Palm Desert. Where are you right now?
Portland, Oregon.
Portland, Oregon. Okay.
I don't know which one of us is in a better situation.
Well, it was 90. I'm in a tank top still because it was 93 degrees here today, so it's pretty warm.
Well, that's a little bit too warm for me. I will take mid-70s with a breeze any day of the week. We've actually been having wind. It's a perfect weekend here to do the program because it's been windy as heck out here in Oregon. Things have been just blowing all over the place. Parts of our windows are coming loose. We're having to, screw those down again. Screens are flying off. Flaps are making noises, as I was saying last week on the program. I guess that really pales in comparison to your story, huh?
Well, I guess so. I guess it's a matter of perspective.
So, how did you come to know that your mother was possessed? When did you realize that?
Well, to be honest with you and tell you the truth, it wasn't until I was in my 40s where I began to put it all together, because it happened over so many years from the ages of 3 to 19. And growing up in it, it's, I always tell people it's like the proverbial frog in the hot water. And, as the temperature goes up, you don't really feel it. And you don't really, I grew up not even realizing that there was something wrong in my house. That there was something, we knew that there was something wrong with our mother, but, as to, the 70s, this all started back in like 71, and it went till, about 80, 86. But, we never put it together. We never went there, as far as calling it demonic. Even though today I've done so many over the last 40 years, because this, it's 40 years past now. I've done such extensive research on the subject, and all of the details and characteristics of demonic possession are all there. I was terrified at the time, but I really wasn't aware of what was going on. We just assumed that she was crazy. I'm the one that took the brunt of and saw the scariest things, disproportional face and hearing the voices and the really bad stuff, which, like I said, it took a long time. She slowly declined over the years. And when you look at exorcism cases, you'll see that that's exactly what happens. It's not like in the movies, that a demon comes into somebody and all of a sudden they're that's not how it works. It's a slow progression where they take over. And of course there's an invitation involved, and we've kind of put our heads together, me and my sister, and found out where the invitation point was, because they can't just come and possess you. But it wasn't until the latter years in the early 80s where it got so bad that she tried to commit murder. And, the social services, the police departments, the fire departments that came to our house because she'd light the house on fire, they didn't know what to make of it. They didn't know how to deal with it. She terrorized all the neighbors on the street, and they didn't know what to do. And, it was the 70s and the early 80s, and for that generation, those parents that were involved and those adults that were in authoritative circles like the police department and stuff, they didn't talk. They didn't talk about anything. They never got down to the problem of anything. And believe it or not, when she first attempted murder on my sister with a butcher knife, she ended up chasing her outside and running around the car. The neighbor heard her screams and they called the police, and the mental institution came out. They took her away, and 3 months later she was back home. So, social services and all this was a joke back then. And they really didn't, I've talked to exorcists that were operating in the Ontario, the province of Ontario during that time, recently in the past few weeks. And they said that was protocol back then. They didn't know what to do. If they couldn't diagnose it, if they had no explanation for it, then it was some sort of case history, and they would shove it aside and kind of bury it. And that's exactly what they did. Even when I was 16, after this attempted murder on my sister, that should have been the end of it right there. She should have been taken away and not allowed access back into the house again. But 3 months later, she was back in, and it escalated to even worse scenarios. So, the authorities, they covered up things. Even today, in research for my book, I called the mental institution that she was taken to, on several occasions. And I asked them for the records, and they said, well, between 75 and 85, those records would have been destroyed. But she said, just for the heck of it, and I heard her clacking, on the keys of the computer. And she says, wow, how odd. I see her name right here, and her records are archived off campus in another building. So I asked her, I said, well, can you get those for me and call me when you get them, within the week? And I never got a call from the lady. I ended up calling back. No one knew nothing. No, the same scenario. No one knew nothing. No one knew the person that was, looking for the records. There was nobody looked for them again. And I was kind of just shut out. So, the whole thing has been a very, very crazy journey. But it wasn't until my 40s until I started researching all these things. I studied every case there was for the past, 20 years or so, from the 13th century on. Every case of exorcism and every case of demonic possession that I could get my hands on from every country, every transcript. And then I started doing the detective work. And you know how detectives do this. You see it on TV. They put the suspect in the middle, of the wall, and then they start to put all the lines and draw everything in the timeline and everything and try to figure it all out. So I did that exact same thing, and all of it pointed to my mother being demonically possessed, and it was a horror story. I mean, I've heard all the exorcism cases that I looked at and the possession cases. They last maybe a few weeks. The Annalise Michelle case, I think, was 9 months. But mine was over 12 years. I lived with this, and my mother suffered. Oh, she suffered greatly. And there was a couple of times where she had a lucid moment where she reached out to me. I mean, I was just a kid, and she'd tell me, they come into me, they run up the back of my spine into my head and perch in my head. And, I was just a kid, and I just, whatever, and then she'd go right back into snarling and talking in different languages. And yeah, I mean, I was terrified. I mean, don't get me wrong. The whole experience was terrified. I never slept. I had insomnia for the next 20 years after she died when I was 19 years old, and I had severe PTSD. I still do to this day. I have it so bad that when nighttime comes, I shake. When I do these interviews, I got, very bad shakes, and my face goes all numb, and I wake up in the morning, with the same thing. And I have to take medication at night, or else I will go sleepless for days and then end up in the hospital. And I mean, I've done that probably, 12 times, blacked out. I mean, the severity of when I went through was so, there's not really an English word to tell you just how it went on 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, even at nighttime. And I slept with a hockey stick and a dresser drawer up against the door, and I wore holes in my mattress from my knee, my hip, my shoulder, and my ankle, right down to the springs from sleeping in the same position with a hockey stick, for maybe 8-9 years. I mean, it was just terrible.
I guess, what were you worried about at that point, Michael?
Well, at nighttime is where things changed. The daytime, she would sit in her chair. She would sing songs, whistle songs, have conversations in different languages and different voices. She was only 5 feet tall, if she was 5 feet, maybe 4'11" and a half. She weighed 250 pounds. She ate like a ravenous animal, and she had very short vocal cords. She had a very high voice. She was a very small human being. And she produced these male-like voices, that were deep and gnarly and very inhuman. And, I was freaked out by it. But like I said, it started very little and it progressed. And after a while, I heard it every day. And it just became a point of frustration and anger. And, nighttime, things would change. When nighttime came, things changed. At dusk, she'd go into her room. I would hear this nightly banging around the room like there's 3 people wrestling, hitting the walls and hitting the floor. We had a subfloor because we had a basement. So, when you hit the subfloor, you hear a bang. The house was only 1,200 square feet. So you heard it all throughout the house. And I would run into her room thinking, what the hell's going on? And, there would be all this banging, and I'd run into the room, and I'd open the door really quick, and she'd be there lying in the bed with the covers, pulled up to her eyeballs, like nothing was happening. And then I'd close the door and walk away, and then it would all start again. And then the screaming and this went on, until sometime in the middle of the night, usually around 3:00 in the morning, she would try to come in my room, and rattle the door, the doorknob to come into my room. And this is what I waited for every night. and she would feel the resistance of this big dresser drawer pushed up, which I loaded down with bricks. I took clothes out and I loaded down all the drawers with bricks, and I pushed it up against the wall every night, as far back as I can remember. And then I slept with a hockey stick, and she would be screaming in the middle of the night. And then the whole thing would start all over again in the morning. She'd be back out in her chair and having conversations, doing this and talking back and forth in different voices. And this just went on and on and on and on and on every day. That, I was always terrified, but it went on for so many years, and we had no visitors. We had no family come over. And, she would even do this when the fire department, we'd be there. Our house would be on fire, and they'd be coming into the living room, because the stovepipe was glowing hot because she was burning everything in the house, and she'd be doing this, and the fire people wouldn't even notice. They wouldn't even notice. It was just absolute madness.
And I'm sure that you probably tried everything to rule, demon-possessed out. I'm sure that was probably the last thing you wanted to consider, at least someone like your mother.
Well, my father was never home. He worked 120 miles away, so he was there 6 days a week, came up for a few hours on the weekend and was gone. He was completely absent. My father was a refugee from World War II in Italy, so he didn't speak very good English. He checked out. He checked out. He knew that there was something wrong with her, but he checked out. He checked out, and it was just me and my sister to fend for ourselves. And like I said, back then, nobody came and checked on you. There was only one time in all of school that one of my teachers actually asked me, "Is everything okay at home?" And I think this was 10th grade. And I said, "Yeah, sure, fine, whatever." And that was the only time. And the only reason why they asked me that was because I was not showing up at school and I was signing my own notes. I'd sign my own name on it. Nobody cared. Nobody cared. In fact, I even ended up quitting school because I couldn't take it anymore. By grade 10, I was losing my mind with this constantly going on. I couldn't function anymore. And I ended up quitting school. And when I quit school, I went down to the counselors. And the only thing they said to me was, "Are you sure you want to do this?" And I said, "Yes." And they said, "Okay, sign here." This is just how the 70s and the 80s was in a small town. We're talking a town of 4,500 people in Ontario, in northern Ontario, in the 70s and early 80s. People were just not engaged. They weren't suspect to anything. There were points in high school where I was going to bomb the school because I was trying to figure out some way of getting attention, and there was a time where I was going to kill my mother. It was either her or me. I didn't know what to do at that point when it got so bad. After my mother attacked my sister left because she was 7 years older than me. She moved away. She moved 100 miles away. So it was just me and her at home. And that's when things got really, really bad. And the thing kind of escalated to the point where, for years, my mother was eating us out of house and home. And I was stealing lunches and stealing out of gardens. I was stealing food for, God knows, a decade, probably doing that. They never caught me at school. I was stealing people's lunches for a decade. I was stealing food out of gardens, stealing money, stealing whatever I could. I got very good at it because, you have to survive, and what my dad ended up doing was putting every bit of food we had into a freezer downstairs in the basement and put a big chain and padlock on it. Well, one day I came home and I came downstairs and I saw her there with a hacksaw, trying to saw off the lock. And I just said to her, "Hey," I just yelled out, "Hey," it was the only thing I could think of. And she never moved her body, but she turned her head to me and just snarled at me. And then she threw down the hacksaw and started running upstairs. And I mean, you're talking a woman who is grossly obese. By this time, she was maybe 260, 270 pounds. I don't know, 4'11", 5 feet. I mean, she was as wide as she was tall. And I chased her upstairs because I was completely drawn to the evil. I was like, this is, it's either you or me. At that point, I was like, I'm going to kill you or you're going to kill me. This is what's going to happen. This is how this is going to end. Anyway, she beat me upstairs. She went into her bedroom, slammed the door, and I went to open the door, and I could see the door bulging because she was leaning up against the door. It was a hollow core door, and the door was bulging, and she was holding the handle to the doorknob. And I tried to open the doorknob, and with all my strength, I couldn't move it. And I could hear her growling behind the door. She's got this, and once again, it's not in her vocal range. She had a very high voice, and it wasn't in her vocal range. And it was freaking me out. But like I said, I was drawn to it. I was like a moth to the flame. I don't know how to explain it, but I wanted it over.
So did it end? That is the question. Devil Take the Hindmost, a true story of terror, is the book from Michael Anthony Gagliardi. With me here on Dead Air Into the Parabnormal, I'm Jeremy Scott. We will continue after these messages.
Make sure to subscribe to Into the Parabnormal's free YouTube channel for shows, news, and exclusive reports. When the lights go down, the strange comes out. Into the Parabnormal. Dead air. Dead air. Dead air. Dead air.
It is Halloween night. I'm Jeremy Scott. 855-790-8255. Toll free in North America. 503-506-0396 outside North America. ITP 51 on Skype. Michael Anthony Gagliardi is my guest and author of the book Devil Take the Hindmost, a true story of terror. Absolutely just mesmerized, to say the least, by his story. And I believe about where you left us, Michael, is, well, you were talking about your mother. She not only did these things within the home, but she also did these things out of the home. And again, this in a what we call it, a suburb of Toronto, Ontario.
No, it's a small town about 100 miles north. It's just a small town on the bay on Highway 26 in Nottawasaga Bay on Georgian Bay, and it's just a small town. And yeah, she terrorized all the neighbors. She would knock on their door, and she would tell them in one of these crazy voices that she was going to cut their heads off. And this went on for so long. The police were at our house all the time, and nothing ever got resolved. It could just continued and it continued. They didn't know how to deal with it. They didn't really know what they were dealing with, you know, and they just didn't know what to do. And even when I was a child and they would come over, I never felt confident that these authorities really knew what they were doing, and they failed me incredibly as far as allowing her to remain in the house, you know, while I was still a minor. So that continues to blow my mind to this day.
So you, obviously, it goes without saying, you would have wished that the authorities would have stepped in and removed her from the situation.
Yeah, and I mean, that happened on a number of occasions, but, you know, they would take her to the mental institution in a straitjacket. And within 3 months, you know, we found out that she was signing herself in. She requested to sign herself in, and then she'd sign herself out, and then they couldn't hold her anymore. And, you know, and they'd bring her back. And I don't know what the statutes were for child neglect and you know, child endangerment. But to me, they vilified it all because, you know, she tried to commit murder. It was seen by the neighbors. I mean, they're the ones that called the police when she was taken away for the first time. And within 3 months, she was back. And it happened a number of times. And it got so terribly bad that it was just me and her. And I would go away for sometimes 7-8 days at a time and not come home. Sometimes I'd be at my friend's house. Sometimes I would, you know, sleep in the park just to not have to come home because she became so violent. She was, you know, her speech patterns were vile and, you know, a lot of blasphemy and just vile. And I just couldn't be around her. I couldn't trust her. And one of the things that I was afraid of that I was going to do something to her because I had planned that because I was getting no help. Not that I thought that I was going to get any help. But I knew for, I would say 3 years that it was going to be me or her. And it was just a matter of time, you know, that one of us was going to kill each other. Fortunately, that never happened. I was able to leave, but, you know, it did the damage nonetheless.
So the question that I was alluding to before the break was, did it end? You said you had wanted it all to end. Did it?
Yes, it did end, and it ended in a very interesting way. The year before, when I was 18, I had planned to leave home and go to California. And I had a plan. There were 4 other guys. We were, you know, in a band together, and we were going to, you know, because I'm a musician. I'm a musician to this day. That's what I do for a living. And we were going to all go to California. And as the year began to decline, each one of them, you know, got cold feet and bowed out. And then on the week before I left, my dad had sold the house, and he set up my mother in an apartment about a half an hour away. I was living down in Toronto at the time, trying with my sister just to get out so I could raise money to leave California so I wouldn't ever come home again. So I came back for a couple of weeks, and I went to see my mother one last time when she was living in this apartment about a half an hour away. I went up, I knocked on the door. It's as if she knew I was there, I was coming. She didn't even look at me. I walked in the door. She was doing her voices and you know, arguing and stuff. I followed her. She sat down on her bed. She continued her voices, and then for a second she stopped. She reached over to the nightstand. She pulled out a letter out of it. She handed it to me. I can't remember if she said anything to me. And then she laid down on her bed and started going into these arguing voices, all these different voices and stuff. And, you know, when she gave me the envelope, I was like, I've had it. I was like, this never ends, you know, and I left. And within a few days, I left for California. I got on a bus and in Buffalo, and I came to California, and I was in California maybe 2 weeks, and I had left my number with a cousin, and that cousin called me and informed me that my mom had died. Now, when he called me, he told me that the only reason they found her was that she was decomposing in her apartment, and the other tenants smelt the smell. So they alerted the police, and the coroner said that she had been dead, I don't know, 10 days or something like this. So it actually worked out that she died on the day that I left Canada. So it's as if, the job was finished, a wringing of the hands, and it's over. But for me, a lot of people ask me about this. They ask me, well, were you relieved, to be so far away in California and that your mother was now deceased? And I had no relief at all. This was just the beginning of my torment, because I didn't even realize that I had PTSD. It took me a long time to figure that out. It took me, I think I was 21 when I started to go through puberty. That's how messed up the chemical system in my body was because of the trauma. I had severe PTSD, and I didn't go through puberty till I was like 21. And, if that wasn't messed up enough, I had insomnia for the next 20 years. And then when I had children, that's when I really lost it, because I had people that were counting on me for responsibility, and I had learned zero responsibility growing up other than stealing. I mean, I was doing my own laundry at 7 years old, and so I was used to living on my own, but now I had, children and a wife, and I had all this responsibility. And then that's when I really started to lose my mind. And then I got checked into Loma Linda in Southern California on suicide watch, because I began to really, really lose it. And I started talking to psychiatrists, and no one could offer me any help, because when I started to tell them the truth of what happened, some of them just said to me straight out, held their hand up and said, I can't help you. Let's just stop right there. I can't help you. This is above me. I have no training in this area. And I think the last psychiatrist I was referred to was one that was a POW psychiatrist, treating guys that killed children and women in Vietnam and were POWs. And, because of the PTSD. But I was never able to find anyone that I could relate to, let alone believe me what I went through. So I kept real silent for a lot of decades, and then I just did the research on my own. And then when I did the research, all the dots connected. The languages, the tonality of the voices, the different languages. She did a lot of prophesying. She prophesied about all kinds of things. She knew where we were when we weren't there, and, telling us all this information that wasn't available to her, and she had, the one scary thing that I'll tell you about is what happened was, I'll continue the story, is when we had locked everything up in the freezer, and I had come downstairs, and I just yelled at her, hey, and she dropped the hacksaw knife, and she looked at me. She didn't move her body. She was bent over, and she looked at me, and she just growled at me. Let me just give you a visual of what she looked like at this time. She's like 4'11", probably 260 to 280 pounds. She's got long black hair, goes in her eyes. Her teeth are all broken. All of her teeth in all of her whole mouth were broken, chipped, half pieces of teeth, and her tongue, which she would wag at me, was serrated on both sides because of the broken molars and broken teeth on the side of her mouth on each side. So her tongue was all chewed up, and it was just gross. And she never complained once about this. And she sat in that chair, and she hit herself with a log on her chest with such intensity that the thuds could be heard outside. I remember coming home one evening. I'd been gone for 3 or 4 days. I parked my bike outside, and I can hear the thuds from outside. I opened the door, and there she is, whistling, these crazy hymns and stuff, and whacking herself with this log. So, and so to go on with the story, forgive me, because when I tell these, when I do these interviews, it causes me a lot of PTSD, and
we really appreciate you bearing through that to tell us your story.
So if I jump around and kind of skip around, that's because of my, the PTSD. But I'll continue the story. This is what ended it for me, was that when I yelled at her downstairs and she dropped the hacksaw, she ran upstairs. Believe it or not, at that time I was 6 feet, 130 pounds. I was nimble, and she beat me upstairs. 4'11", 260 pounds. She beat me upstairs. She got in, slammed her door. I told you that the door was bulging out. She was holding the doorknob, and I could hear her growling behind the door. I tried to, wiggle the doorknob. Nothing happened. So I decided just to stand there and kind of wait her out, because I was done. At this point, I was like, it's you or me. I didn't care who. I just wanted it to end, because I was losing my mind at this point. So I waited there, and about 10 minutes later, I saw the bulge in the door disappear, and I saw the handle relax. So I kind of rubbed my hands together, and I grabbed the doorknob, and I flung the door open, and she was standing there, and she had her hand over her head with a handful of pennies. And at that very moment when I opened the door, we met eye to eye. And this is what really sent me into shock, was that the left side of her face, over her eyebrow and around to her temple, was all bulged out like a balloon. Like if you press on the side of a balloon and then it bulges out the other side, it was all pulsating. And there was a big ball on the side of her, above her forehead, above her eyebrow to her temple, and it was bulging back and forth. And we met eyes, and she had no, I don't know why I always have a hard time saying this. She had no pupil. There was no pupil there. Her eyes were just one big black marble. And when I saw her face and I saw it bulging on the side, I got so freaked out that at the same moment she lunged at me, growling. I ran outside. She chased me outside. She did not follow me outside. Once I got outside, I heard her go back around the house, down the hallway, and she slammed the door with such force that the windows all shook. And at that point, I was standing on the driveway, realizing what I just saw, that her face was not her own. And I was in complete shock at that point. I was trying to just say a word. I was going like this, and I couldn't say a word. I was trying my very best to compose myself, but I couldn't. I was completely in shock, and I didn't know what to do. But I knew I had to call my dad. That particular afternoon, my dad was in town. I believe it was a Saturday Saturday afternoon. So I reached in the door. We in Canada, we've got the thing called a mud room. A mud room where you dust the snow off your feet and then you enter the living room. It's just a little tiny room. Well, I went in there, and then I opened the door to see if she was around. She wasn't. I reached in, I grabbed the phone, and the phone had a long cable on it, so I took it outside, and I closed the exterior door. And I went, it was a rotary phone. So, you put your finger in the hole and you dial. And it took me 20 minutes at least to dial. I couldn't even get my finger in the dial because it was shaking so bad. And I'd get the phone number, partial of the phone number, and then I'd screw it up and I'd have to start all over again. It took me a good 20 minutes. And I knew the phone number off heart where my dad was. And his girlfriend at the time answered the phone, And I was like, I couldn't say a word. I was still in shock. And this was maybe 45 minutes later. I was still in shock. I couldn't say a word. My dad got on the phone. He said, "What's wrong? What's going on? What's going on?" I couldn't say anything, but he knew it was me. And he says, "Okay, I'm coming. And he was only a mile away. So within a few minutes, he came into the driveway, and I tried to tell him what was happening. I really couldn't say anything. So he proceeded to go inside the house, and I followed him. Now, as soon as he got into the mudroom, he opened the door that went into the living room. At the exact moment he opened the door and walked in, my mother jumped on him, grabbed him, threw him to the ground, jumped on top of him and started scratching his face and started snarling and growling and just scratching at his face, just scratching. My dad was completely taken off guard. At that time, he was 5'7", probably 160 pounds. So, in good physical shape, but once again, she threw him to the ground, was scratching at him, snarling the whole time. He was able to break away from her, and he ran outside, and I followed him outside, and he was in complete shock. He couldn't say anything to me. He was standing there. I could see his hands were shaking because he realized that wasn't the person that we knew, and he was shaking, and it took him a while. I still had the phone outside. So when he was able to compose himself, he called the police. The police called the mental institution, and they came into the house, and my mother's window was right there at the driveway. It's right in the center of the house. I could hear her talking to the mental health workers in a normal voice. I don't know what's going on here. I don't know what's going on. I never heard my mother talk in a normal voice in a normal conversation in my entire life. Only during those times when the police would come over. Anyway, they ended up taking her in a straitjacket, and they took her to a mental institution, and 3 months later she was back. And that's when I had it. I was old enough, and that's where I had made my plans, and I left for Toronto, and she died a few weeks later after I left and was in California. And that was the end of the story.
Bella wants to know, do you think that the demonic force had an influence on the authorities, being the police and the social services, that, kept them from really investigating, doing their jobs?
Well, she was very cunning. Like I told you, I never heard her talk in a normal voice and say normal things from my childhood till I was 19. I never heard her say anything. She always talked these crazy things and in different voices. This went on for so long. I never knew my mother, though she lived there. And when the police would come, in which they came, I would estimate, I'm going to guesstimate here, that they were probably at our house in a 12-year period, maybe 20 times, possibly more. That's not including the fire department. And for some reason, she was able to manipulate the policemen, and they always left. They always left thinking there was nothing wrong. And I look back at that today, and I'm in complete shock that nothing happened.
Yeah. Well, Michael, it is just an amazing story of survival. The audience is absolutely mesmerized. It is. I mean, let's make no bones about it. It is a story of terror, and it takes a lot of courage to do what you've done. I appreciate you so much coming on the program tonight.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. I mean, all of the details are in the book, but, when an hour is not long enough to describe everything that happened, you really have to read the book if you're interested in any such thing like that,
Yeah. Devil Take the Hindmost, a true story of terror by Michael Anthony Gagliardi. Appreciate you coming on so much.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Absolutely. And to the audience, we appreciate you lending us your ear on this Halloween weekend. It's just been an amazing, wonderful time together. And I mean that. And next weekend, we're going to do this program at a later time and for 3 hours. So again, Sunday morning, early hours for those of you on the East Coast. Late night Saturday is how I tell everybody on the West Coast. So midnight Pacific time, and that's the time change weekend. So if your clocks do this automatic thing where they roll back on their own, just take that into consideration. Midnight Pacific, and you'll have to do the conversion for your time zone live from the studios of FM News 101 KXL as we roll back the clocks next weekend for 3 hours here on this program. Dead Air is going off the air for 2021 to return again on Halloween week in 2022. From the cold, dark depths of a secret dungeon somewhere deep in the remote Pacific Northwest, come over to Twitter. Join us on the after show at Parabnormal Show. You can take part if you've got the Twitter app. You can listen if you're on the website. So either way, it's your call. From the cold, dark depths of a secret dungeon somewhere deep in the remote Pacific Northwest. Good night, everyone.